14 months after our first WGN Investigates report on questionable spending by South Suburban politician Tiffany Henyard, it appears she has been forced off the ballot.
Thornton Township Supervisor Tiffany Henyard, who was appointed to that position tonight, lost her bid for the Democratic Party's nomination in this rarely used.
Flamboyant and branding herself the super mayor, scandal-plagued politician Tiffany Henyard is in an uphill battle for her political life as a Thornton Township and Dolton, Illinois official. This time, however, another scandal chases her, a result of exclusion by the Democrats from the ballot for township supervisor. The explosive fallout of allegations over election tampering, voter suppression, corruption, and lawsuits is really the question now. Does this represent a story of the political leader fighting for justice, or rather a last-ditch, desperate attempt at clinging to power as growing opposition and scandal mounts against him?
7 minutes, that's all it took for Tiffany Henyard to be out as the Democratic nominee for Thornton Township Supervisor, and she left here visibly upset.
State Senator and Township Democratic Committeeman Napoleon Harris created a polarization that threw the local political scene into unprecedented storm drama by deciding on caucusing rather than an election primary for the nomination of candidates on the ballot for the Democratic Party that many would perceive as a deliberate move against Tiffany Henyard in a bid to shut her out of the race. The strategy seemed to pay off. Henyard's name was conspicuously absent from the ballot for the next election, and her disqualification was attributed to a technicality. Her slate had failed to include a certified assessor. This gave Harris grounds to reject her candidacy outright. Harris and his slate took advantage of this mistake and swept the caucus, securing the Democratic nomination for the April election. This move to drop a primary ignited a firestorm of debate about fairness, procedural integrity, and the motivations of Harris. Advocates for the move positioned it as necessary to enforce candidacy standards and order in local governance. Detractors saw it as a Machiavellian play to marginalize Henyard and derail her ambitions. It was fallout that went far beyond the caucus hall and ignited allegations of political sabotage, deepening the splits in the community. Henyard and her supporters loudly argued that the moves by Harris represented a flagrant ploy to undermine her leadership and consolidate control for his political agenda. Harris and his allies insisted that the caucus was conducted under party rules and was indispensable for restoring credibility to local politics. This contested episode has transformed the electoral map of the locality and increased polarization in an already polarized community, raising many long-term questions about power balances, accountability, and the future of local democracy. Tiffany Henyard's response to her disqualification from the caucus was explosive enough in its dramatic turn, elevating an already contentious political saga. Tension finally peaked when Henyard stormed out of the caucus meeting, visibly furious and hurling sharp accusations against Napoleon Harris and his allies for a coup that aimed to dethrone her. According to reports, her voice rang with indignation as she declared, "This is election rigging at its finest," and described the process as illegal and a gross attempt to undermine her and disenfranchise her supporters. As Henyard described it, the caucus was a sham orchestrated to remove her from the ballot and quash the will of her constituents. She cast Harris's actions as cynical and undemocratic, painting the arrangement as a thinly veiled power play that mocked the electoral process. That is how her base saw it, at least, and that is how she felt. Henyard's indignation went beyond words. In fiery speeches and interviews, she vowed to take legal action against everyone involved in what she described as a gross violation of democratic principles. Her declaration to sue would eventually become a rallying cry to her supporters, which had magnified the controversy to polarize the community more and more. To Henyard, this was not just a personal affront, but a battle for her political survival and a crusade against what she claimed was a corrupt system working against the interests of the people. The disqualification, plus her subsequent outburst over what had happened, has given focus to the unfolding drama about the election, debating matters about the integrity and transparency of a process. Critics charged the disqualification of Henyard was justified because she failed in qualifying to present a slate by submitting a certified assessor on her slate. even as her supporters defend what has happened as part and parcel of Harris's strategies as an incumbent to stay in office and crush opposing sentiment. Henyard's defiance has only strengthened her resolve. She has positioned herself as a champion of democracy, promising to expose what she says is widespread corruption and election malpractice. Her fiery rhetoric and unyielding determination have energized her base, even as opponents accuse her of prioritizing self-preservation over serving the community. Meanwhile, the controversy has deepened divisions within the township. Public opinion is sharply split between those who see Henyard as a victim of political manipulation and those who view her as an opportunist unwilling to accept accountability. The legal battles Henyard has promised to initiate threaten to drag the township into further turmoil, potentially delaying progress on pressing community issues. Despite this, she insists that these fights are necessary to uphold principles of fairness and justice. Henyard's speeches inspire her supporters, who have perceived her as a bold leader standing against the game system. Her decision to fight back has kept her at the center of all the attention. The stakes could not be higher for Henyard. Her political future, reputation, and standing in the community hang in the balance. Whether her legal maneuvering and vocal defiance will reinstate her into the race or further alienate her critics is uncertain. This is quite clear, however. The Henyard reaction to disqualification has made this ordinary local election into a full-fledged high-stakes political showdown. Her insistence to fade not quietly but by a fight that will break at any cost underscores how seriously this moment is being treated. As the saga unfolds, questions of fairness, power, and democracy loom larger than ever, ensuring that this dramatic chapter in Henyard's career will remain a defining moment in the township's political history.
Because they can't beat me. If they could beat me, they would have went to the polls. But now when I bring the people out, you don't let them.
And this, in and of itself, is an explosive reaction on the part of Tiffany Henyard at her getting disqualified in the caucus vote. A dramatic turn of events, twist of events in political saga. When the crescendo comes that visibly angry, she storms out of the meeting in caucus and hurls sharp accusations against Napoleon Harris and his friends. She accused them of planning a coup to scuttle her political career, and according to reports, she was heard saying, "This is election rigging at its finest." Henyard attacked the process as illegal and a brazen attempt to disenfranchise her and her supporters. Henyard painted the caucus as farce, engineered specifically to eliminate her from the race and suppress the will of her constituents. She framed Harris's action as calculated and undemocratic, branding him as orchestrating a thinly veiled power grab which mocked the integrity of the electoral process. These feelings had a strong resonance within her core base, who saw exclusion as stark injustice and an affront to democratic tenets. Not satisfied with words, Henyard threatened to take a legal stand. In hot speech and interviews, she declared that she would take a lawsuit against those whom she was accusing of breaching democratic values. Her defiance became the rallying call for her followers, and the controversy grew louder, with a rift in the community much deeper. It was more to Henyard a fight for survival in her political career and a cause against the rotten system, as she said, working against the will of the people. Disqualification, combined with Henyard's fiery response, is the new controversy of this unfolding election drama. Her removal from the ballot, say the critics, is well justified since she was deficient in several basic qualifications, such as the lack of an assessor among those in her slate. Her supporters are claiming it to be an intentional maneuver by Harris in her power play, doing away with all competition. The more Henyard defies the status quo, the stronger she becomes. She now calls herself a champion of democracy and claims that she will expose all that she believes is wide-ranging corruption and electoral malpractice. Her inflammatory words have energized her supporters, even as her opponents are saying that she focuses more on saving herself than serving the community. This has, in turn, made the divisions in the township more deepened as public opinion sharply splits on the case. While some believe that Henyard is a victim of political manipulation, others believe she is an opportunist unwilling to accept accountability. The promise to start legal battles promises to entangle the township into turmoil and potentially delay much-needed progress on pressing community issues. However, Henyard maintains these fights are necessary to uphold fairness and justice. For Henyard, It couldn't get any higher. Politics of her future, reputation, and standing in the community hang by a thread. If she will be restored back to the race or her defiances further alienate the critics remains uncertain. But what is clear is that Henyard's explosive reaction turned this local election into a high-stakes political showdown. This saga that will continue to unfold is so significant because questions of fairness, power, and democracy loom bigger than ever, ensuring this dramatic chapter in Henyard's career will remain a defining moment in the township's political history.
The right way. Illegal.
Pro-Henyard supporters have unleashed criticism storms against Napoleon Harris as being behind the caucus where he allegedly planned to clear a smooth path to uncontested political dominance. A strong supporter of Henyard, Keith Price, declared the event as the most flagrant scam he has ever seen, claiming hundreds of eligible participants were wrongly excluded in the process. According to Price, the exclusion was no accident but a calculated move designed to undermine Henyard's supporters and ensure Harris's slate prevailed unchallenged. This feeling of disenfranchisement runs deep in Henyard's camp, who claims that the process was loaded with irregularities and devised to suppress opposition voices. Supporting these claims is election lawyer Carrie Kraft-Heffer, whose review of the caucus revealed glaring procedural lapses that question its validity. Heffer highlighted key inadequacies, including that the process did not seek signed affidavits from the participants, a basic procedure meant to verify voter qualification and ensure the integrity of the electoral process. Second, she cited other anomalies that, taken together, undermine transparency and fairness that a democratic election should embody. These results have only served to strengthen the side of Henyard's claims that the caucus was defective and designed to prevent dissent and disenfranchise her constituents. Critics argue that such safeguards bypassed for the sake of consolidating power over achieving a legitimate outcome. Passionate denunciation by Price and expert critique by Heffer have escalated the cry, with the supporters of Henyard describing the situation as a grave instance of systemic corruption. It becomes an instance of how deep political interests can go to bend rules in their favor, leaving common citizens jaded and cynical about the very process of elections. More than the attack on their candidate, his supporters believe the caucus represents an assault on democratic principles. The frustration, anger, and perceived injustice of the whole ordeal have, within Henyard's camp, fueled a determination to take a stand against what they consider a gross distortion of justice. It symbolizes a broken system that needs repair and more reasons to go ahead with the accountability issues and forcing the organizers of the process to create an equitable political framework. Already, the episode has set deeper fault lines within the community and raises urgent questions about transparency, accountability, and the future of local democracy.
People were getting let in at the proper time. We had a caucus. And the people voted for us slated candidates to represent.
Some locals have criticized the allegations of voter suppression by Tiffany Henyard as an orchestrated move to deflect attention from her leadership failures. Critics argue that Henyard had enough time to prepare for the caucus and ensure that her slate met all the requirements but failed to do so, thus questioning her claims of unfair treatment. They point out that following the set rules does not constitute voter suppression and that Henyard's failure to meet these standards reflects poorly on her organizational and leadership capabilities. The charge that Henyard abused township resources, for example, that she organized transportation for voters who, by the end of the day, could not vote because they were not in compliance makes compounding skepticism. At the level of logistics, she failed her charges of willful exclusion and bias, making her appear sloppier than conspiratorial. A vocal resident declared it was entirely Henyard's fault that a slate was not completed and procedural mistakes were not made in conspiracy, but rather in negligence. These criticisms are further fanned by the contentious record of Henyard, which includes allegations of misusing township assets for personal and political gain. For many observers, her claims of an unjust process sound hollow against the backdrop of her administrative controversies. The critics argue that instead of focusing on procedural shortcomings, Henyard should acknowledge lapses in strategy and accountability. Her allegations do little to inspire confidence in her leadership. For the critics, the mess surrounding the caucus is a symptom of deeper problems with Henyard's leadership style, and they question her ability to represent her constituents effectively while upholding principles of fairness and transparency. Her opponents claim that she alienates the community with confrontational rhetoric and questionable decisions, which they believe further polarize her political career. Despite these criticisms, the advocates continue to speak up for Henyard, arguing that exclusion from the ballot is only part of a more significant plot against her dislodgement. They add that Napoleon Harris and cohorts deliberately and knowingly bent caucus rules to end her candidature. But locals also point out that Henyard's constant public outbursts, like calling Harris a coward and claiming he had staged a hostile takeover, do little to inspire confidence in her ability to lead. According to supporters, the real aim of her opponents is silencing a leader who has given much to the community. This is not simply about the caucus. It's an attempt to eliminate a leader who has done more for this community than anyone else, said one supporter. However, there is still uncertainty as to whether Henyard has enough support for a significant write-in or if the damage to her reputation is too great to overcome. Harris has dismissed all the claims, saying that the caucus was conducted lawfully and fairly. He said that holding a caucus was not wrong because, although it is not something the residents of Thornton Township are accustomed to because of its low occurrence, many other townships in Illinois hold it. Harris added, "The procedures were followed, and the results were as expected." Now her attorney is gearing up to contest results in front of that Iowa panel, a charge of rules being broken and exclusion is calculated. This, too, is added fallout, deepening polarity between community members. Longtime critics of Henyard themselves have applauded her expulsion, a move they view as long in the making. Besides the caucus allegations, she has been under much scrutiny due to a corruption case involving misdirection of finances when she served as Dolton's mayor and Thornton Township supervisor. According to reports, she is supposed to have embezzled some taxpayer money from her local government to use for personal purposes. An example being that she paid over $30,000 in Amazon purchases in just one day and $100,000 in travel expense, with meals and similar questionable expenditures. She has since been nicknamed the worst mayor in America. Under Henyard's management, Dolton's finances apparently worsened, with the village's general fund balance declining from more than $5 million to a deficit of nearly $4 million. Former Chicago Mayor Lori Lightfoot, hired to review Dolton's financial standing, characterized the financial situation as severe. The probe also uncovered excessive overtime paid to police officers, including one officer who received more than twice their annual salary in 2 years. As Henyard battles to return to the ballot, the controversies surrounding her leadership and alleged corruption continue to deepen divisions within the community. The outcome of this struggle will likely have lasting implications for Thornton Township's political future.